So next up, we're going to be checking out TheBurgerkrieg's Alex Jones was right about evil wizards. Mage, the Ascension lore. Also, I have no idea what Alex Jones talks about. I usually filter out anything he says. It's just noise. So if he's actually gone on rants about evil wizards, yeah, actually, no, that'd be par for course at this point. It wouldn't even surprise me. But this is TheBurgerkrieg talking about the Nephandi and the Marauders. I'm watching this video not just because I want to, which I do, because it's TheBurgerkrieg and he's awesome, but because Martin, who is in the chat at the time of recording this, heavily implied that, hey, for the game we're playing in Mage the Ascension, you know, the one where I'm threatening to bring out the Cthulhu book, you should really listen to the Nephandi video. Yeah, I'm just going to take this as a very blatant hint that I probably should watch this, or I will get around to suffering for not. Yeah, when the DM leaves hints, you should probably listen. We're going to jump into this, see where this goes. And it goes, it's Nephandi. So, probably heavily redacted for YouTube's sake.
What is evil, and who decides this? When left to devices, some humans try things I'm not allowed to say in the first 30 seconds of a...
How old is this video? He said 30 seconds. I thought they'd change that. Oh, it's only 7 months old. I guess the change was more recent than that.
Video because everyone in the world lives in America. The trope of the evil wizard is as old as time itself. It appears in folk and fairy tales from the very beginning of civilization. It's baked into fantasy fiction, certainly, and some might say it's even older than the kindly good wizard.
Really?
Though I would personally contest that. Is it a product of piety, of the wish to be free?
Actually, this is one of the things that I'm actually curious about. When did the current mythology around the wizard become a thing? I want to say Tolkien is when it's probably become codified in the same way as tall, majestic elves. But it's not the only way it's been done. When did that type of wizard happen? Because Merlin's an example, but he was very much his own thing altogether. Was there anything prior to that? What just... Or would this be going back to more of the oracle setups, or say sometimes even other aspects of just magic users worshiping the gods and getting power? I don't know, but when did the codified bathrobe pointy hat wizard really come about? I just don't know, and I actually kind of am fascinated about the concept now.
Of tyrants, of anti-intellectualism? Who cares? Jesus Christ. It's a villain. What more do you want? Maybe it's the fucking misled good guy. Power hungry. Something like that. Corrupted, maybe. Deal with the demon, you know, he corrupts you, does black magic, summons corpses, that kind of thing. He steals, abducts maidens and twinks, because that's what the plot needs him to do as a villain. Come on.
Yeah.
Move on here. There's a plot we need to get to. And look, I'm not gonna knock something that works, but I do like a little more depth to my villains. And especially the evil wizard is sort of an archetype that has taken center stage when it comes to evil mages, when there's really a whole bunch of other ways to go about it. Much like Mage the Ascension can expand our mind as to what a wizard can be, it does some of its most interesting work.
Because even though the 9 traditions usually use the Hermetics as the basic wizard, with a staff and Gandalf style, well, explicitly Gandalf style look to it, except for when they don't, the other ones are like a Sheshia novel, where it's literally just fighting and punching people until you understand the power that you are magic. Because anything can be magic if you do it. And then you realize in Mage, everything is magic anyways.
When it comes to exploring the concept of evil. So even if you are, for some reason, here, even though you don't play any Mage or World of Darkness games at all, if you're here to maybe not even play any kind of game, maybe...
To be fair, one of the games we played in Mage was literally, your goal today is to deal with customer service for an internet service provider. Yeah. And somehow this ended with one of the players' souls being owned by a fae. Honestly, probably better than normal customer service.
You're more of a writer or a world builder. Stick around. A lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about in this video is going to expand your horizons too. It's going to be full of ideas that you can use in whatever setting you want. Don't make a video about magic systems unless you have read the huge tomes that are the Mage rulebooks, I guess. And if you've clicked on this because it's...
He might be making a joke here, but also I think it's legitimately good advice, just because I said earlier, Mage is anything is magic. The reality is, they are literally writing an entire system of anything you believe is magic. Here are the ways other people have done it because anything works. Also, it's a very adaptable system if you just don't know what to do for your own style of storytelling, because this just works for lit RPG based in the general.
It has Alex Jones in the title. Hello as well to you. There will be an Alex Jones reference much later in this video.
Or right
that's
now.
What happened. It's not clickbait. It actually is in the video.
Oh,
but
no.
this isn't about conspiracy theories. We're talking about the law of World of Darkness.
Although, theoretically, there are no conspiracy theories in World of Darkness, because if you believe it, it probably is real. How? Yeah, you're probably wrong about, but it probably is, because it's that weird.
Which is a pen and paper TTRPG. It's a role-playing game, or rather a whole range of role-playing games set in an alternate version of our world, where like vampires and monsters are real. But none of that is actually real. It's made up. Please do not believe it. I do not believe it. That's not what this video is about.
I get where you're dropping, Burger. Yeah, nothing like that is real at all. Yeah. You know, there's probably going to be someone in the comments when this video goes out going, oh yeah, that's probably real. I should believe this. I need to make this the focus of my life. I'm just saying, man, there's been a few times where people have made obvious jokes, and I've seen comments, even in my reactions, going, that seems fair. No, it's really not. But they do it, and it is moderately terrifying.
I have to say this because it's happened to me before, right? On my short story channel, who is Betty, there's sort of a creepypasta called The Evolutionary Reason for the Uncanny Valley. And for whatever reason...
Wait, there's a creepypasta of that? I thought the reason for it was you recognize that if something is that you don't expect, it probably is something that could kill you. Like if you see deformities on a person, like missing limbs from illness, and there's black pus seeping out of them. It's like, you know what? I should not be there, because it's a safety thing. That's actually the reason for the Uncanny Valley. It's literally you don't know what's going on, but anyone who doesn't have this reaction might find out, and finding out usually is by dying. Very unpleasant.
It's become sort of a haven, a hotbed, very popular with people who believe what it says. Like they are genuinely engaging with it, and they're like, oh, this scientist, I looked his name up and he doesn't appear anywhere. It's like, yes, because he's fake. It's a short story. It's not a real thing that happened. Anyway, most wizards and...
Also, just to give an idea of what I mean by people believing things that they obviously shouldn't, Solomon's Mines was a fictional novel. The guy who later discovered Troy read the novel, got people to give him money, and then went to Southern Africa to blow shit up with dynamite. It's an obvious scam at his point, except he then accidentally found Troy by blowing up everything related to the Trojan War until the city's built under it, so their actual evidence of Troy from the Trojan War and the Iliad and the Odyssey is gone because he blew it up, and they found out there was things even older than it underneath it because he was excavating with dynamite. And I'm just bringing that up as like the guy who did that also got people to give him money for a fictional novel to find something that never existed. Solomon's Mines in Africa, Southern Africa, that people in real life gave him money for. I'm being very repetitive right now because this is not real. Troy is real. I think it was in Turkey. That's the biggest surprise, that he actually found something. And this came after him getting money for the Africa thing. But the Solomon's Mines, it was a book written about finding the mines of Solomon. It was fiction. It said in the novel it was fiction. People believed it was real. And this guy managed to fundraise his historical documentation via explosives by making people believe fiction. It is unfortunately common through most of history. Oh, it's in Greece? I thought Troy was in Turkey. Huh.
Most entities in World of Darkness in general.
Also, people are like Martin. No, the Solomon's Mine was thought in the novel. It was set in Africa, where the guy who did this later went on a separate expedition to look for Troy, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't Turkey. Yeah, he did 2 different expeditions which he used dynamite. Actually, no, he did more than 2. These are just the 2 that come to mind first. This guy was... I could go on a rant for him. He actually pisses me off.
General are morally ambiguous. It's kind of part of the whole setting. Often evil is a matter of perspective, and even when it kinda isn't, it still kind of is. At the very least, the wizard doing the evil things will have some sort of justification for them. This is not really the case with Marauders, and it definitely isn't the case with Nephandi. As a quick
the only thing I know about Marauders going in is that they're crazy. Paradox doesn't apply to them. And they all attack Nephandi on sight. Like, that's the one thing that is predictable about them. They're all insane. They're all randomly bullshit. And they will just do things wrong.
Content warning, this section of the video deals heavily with themes of derealization and a loss of a grip on reality. It deals with the category of crazy people, of like as a group, as a label, and insanity in a similar way. And if those things are things that you're sensitive about, you might want to take a break every once in a while. You can just hit the pause button. I will be right here. Madness is always a danger to mages. Their very existence is predicated on the denial of consensual reality, and understanding that what sleepers believe is real is not necessarily real, and you can change it if you have the will and the right tools. Unfortunately, this also requires belief in those alternative tools and paradigms, and perhaps more than anyone else, mages are constantly confronted with realities that directly oppose theirs. It's not just that their vision of the universe diverges from the consensual real world they usually reside in. All the other mages they know also have their own ideas, and these mages see those made manifest also. It's not a stretch to believe that the awareness that reality is subjective might make it difficult for you to keep your grip on said reality, which is
literally the entire point of the Ascension War initially. Oh, excuse me, losing my voice here. Where the technocracy were like, hey, let's standardize everything so the pockets of what the fuck is going on, and it's usually horrible, wouldn't be horrible. And then also they were horrible, as opposed to the traditions who really liked the freedom to just do whatever they wanted without any recourse, and how Paradox didn't punish them for just doing cool shit, but also they were literally horrible. And they had random piles of bullshit everywhere. You see, the thing is, when you believe you're absolutely right and reality is subjective, you're usually okay with just fucking around and having everyone else find out for you. Yeah, it's a pattern.
Why some mages slip into a state of insanity that breaks them. It turns them into marauders. Mages who don't just break consensus, but supplant it altogether. They walk around with a sort of reality bubble around them that adheres to their personal ideas of what reality is.
Although I am still wondering what's the relation between marauders and high-level mages who are stuck in Horizon realms of their own making. Or if there is no difference, and it's just one is still allowed in creation because they just aren't powerful enough to sustain it outside of it yet. I don't know. That does sound like something that would almost go into the other White Wolf franchise of Exalted, though.
And as they move through the world, things enter those bubbles and change to become compliant with their personal paradigm. Cars become horse-drawn carriages, birds become government spy robots, curtains sing Nina Simone, and human souls divest into ethereal clouds of smoke. And when they leave, everything goes back to normal again, as though nothing had happened at all. Some say that Marauders have simply achieved enlightenment before they were ready for their ascension. And are we really to say that they're wrong?
It would be the ultimate irony if technically they are completely right, but also would make the concept of Ascension way more fucked up, because the more you look at Marauders, they are literally kind of terrifying. Not in the Nephandi horrible evil way, but in the basically one of those canon Marauders is someone who's just all about pain, their own, and it's basically Slanesh levels of pain. And if you know what I just said, you understand why I'm not going into greater detail here, because no, to epitomize a concept and essentially reach that enlightenment without the power, let's just not think about that. It almost makes it seem like the end goal of mages to ascend is in itself actually terrible, but I don't know. And it honestly depends on your DM and how you're playing it. It could go either way, but I don't know if White Wolf will ever answer that. I'm intentionally not answering. It seems like the right way to do it because it gives a lot of leeway. Unless they take the end times route and just give you a bunch of ideas of how it could end.
Your vision of the world actualizing wherever you go, not the ultimate goal of a mage? Is it not their ultimate personal paradise, but it's everywhere? Marauders are dangerous not because they're malignant, but because they are out-of-control reality benders. Usually just changing things around in a way that violates consensus would lead to paradox backlash. And it does with Marauders too. Consensus is not happy about a bubble of alternate reality pushing its way through its guts. Like an acrid fart, it's not really something that Consensus enjoys. But instead of hitting the Marauder, the paradox backlash hits other mages and entities around them. So while mages tend to try to hunt and get rid of Marauders, they have to be careful not to be sent to reality prison in a kangaroo court case of mistaken identity. Of course, you don't have to be a Marauder for your grip on reality to become a problem. Mages are always at risk.
Oh, we're talking about quiet already. This I have heard about. It's the insanity you can get. Quiet, a state of delusion in which a mage's worldview overpowers their perception and sometimes reality itself. Which also might apply to the leadership of the technocracy who are all missing. But prior to them going missing, talking to them was the equivalent of talking to someone who already knew they were right and no one else was ever going to tell them otherwise, because if they're in their own little horizon realm, they're right. Everyone's right. This is for best for everyone. If you don't agree with me, you're wrong, and you won't exist in a world where you're wrong.
If succumbing to a state of mind known as quiet, which is not always necessarily very quiet, in which they lose their grip on what is real and what is part of their magical paradigm.
But also the entire bullshit with Mage is the understanding that everything is magic all the way down. So they might be the most sane because they just don't have to acknowledge anyone else's reality. Where the other aspect would be, Mage is a really interesting system because the deeper you get into it, you realize this might be the most accurate way, but you're too sane. They might be suffering from too much sanity. That also doesn't work as sanity, but he's insane, but because it doesn't matter, because it's all magic, whatever you believe is real is real. So if your own delusion is overpowering reality, then it was never real in the first place. You see where this can get confusing really fast, right?
This can happen as paradox backlash, or in moments of great stress, distress, or cataclysmic realizations of some sort of deeper truth, which is something that mages do a lot. And it's a sliding scale. It's not a binary thing where, like, at first the mage becomes a bit more eccentric and delusional in ways that no one, especially not they themselves, might immediately notice. It progresses through irrational shifts in personality and minor manifestations of
Hobgoblin, a hallucination experienced by a mage in quiet, manifested in the shared consensual reality. Ooh, that's one I have a note about.
Their hallucinatory impressions, known as hobgoblins, to them ultimately becoming walking sources of paradox that just sort of manifests things all around them. At this point, I should mention, without the benefit of being immune to paradox backlash. That is, by the way, one of the main reasons that magical paradigms and traditions exist in the first place. It's not that mages lack the imagination to shape the world in novel ways entirely according to their will. It's that being predisposed to a certain already extant alternate worldviews, becoming part of a society built around those views, is a safeguard. For mages, a loss of reality means...
Because it's a way to align your views with the more consensual reality and area. Because if you're with a bunch of people who already believe the same thing you do, you're not fighting against the entire tide. You're fighting with the tide that has a bunch of people swimming in the same direction. I'm using a school of fish analogy, aren't I? I'm not even... No, I know for a fact it's not even correct, but it's close enough.
Nothing compared to sleepers, but groups, however informal, check one another with the reinforcement of their alternative consensus. Unfortunately, like many things that exist to keep us safe, this creates a huge amount of conflict and suffering as well. As with so many things in the world of darkness, there are three major flavors of quiet that align with, you guessed it, the metaphysical triad. Dynamism, stasis, entropy. Mages...
I know entropy is what the Euthanatoid get often, where it's like everything dies and I should help it. And I think stasis is where you're overwhelmed by your belief is right and everyone else should agree with you. I don't remember what dynamism was.
In their worldview are immensely diverse, so what each of the quiet types means includes a lot of variance. But they can all be sort of categorized as one of these three because, well, maybe it's because we want to do that, maybe because we need to categorize them somehow. Dynamism is represented by naturally the most common type of madness, which asserts a different reality through your subconscious. The world is different than how it appears because it is missing the elements of your paradigm, and so you will just perceive them, and eventually they will just show up because...
So in other words, if I believe people can only breathe because a purple unicorn was punching them in the back of the throat to make the breathe happen, not breathing, just breathe, like part of the lungs working was the unicorn punching you, it would become real. That is kind of fucked up.
They are there. It's everyone else who's in denial about their existence. Madness also comes with severe emotional instability and mood swings as you are drawn in and out of various degrees of reality. Aspects of your mind will get excited about knowing that what you believe is true, and then lament a moment later that what you believe seems to not be true after all. And these powerful emotions...
So it's literally not just the swing of being insane, it's the swing of, I was right. Why am I not right? I was right. I told you all. I will show you. Oh, I was still wrong. Fuck. And now everyone knows I'm wrong. Ah, but I was right. Okay. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's not even insanity. It's just a natural reaction to vindication versus the destruction of your identity, but swinging between them without realizing it. That's actually kind of depressing.
States will bleed into the rest of you. Stasis is represented by the more uncommon denial, also known as clarity. Instead of asserting things about the world, your mind instead denies anything that isn't congruent with your particular worldview. Initially, certain conclusions and thoughts that would seem obvious become impossible to imagine. Things that don't fit into your paradigm are replaced with whatever the closest equivalent to them is. But
think about how crazy what he just said is. If you deny reality, but you're a marauder, and reality reflects or deflects, actually both work, what you believe is real. Think about, you live in a world where there are no vampires. Okay, there are no vampires. And then Cain walks in. He's not a vampire. I mean, I'm going to put on this one and just say that the vampire probably beats him because Cain wins regardless. But maybe they never fight, and it just is for a brief moment. Everything else is true. It's just not considered a vampire. This is the level of fucked up things can get. Or if they just walk into the Camarilla and suddenly it's just a bunch of random old farts who happen to have pointy teeth, but they're not vampires. They don't exist. There are no vampires. Or they just weren't there. You just walk through an empty building. You don't know. It's just like weird shit like that. Gemma, you're mentioning flat earthers. That might be a good example of what that would look like IRL. But in Mage, if a denial was a person like that, they would find the edge of the world if they decided to go to it. And it would be the edge. And they could fall off it. Or someone else could get pushed off the edge. And when they walk away, how does that snap back to reality? I don't know. But it could, and they would probably find out. And God help you, if a mage falls off, if they only fall into the Umbra, they might be lucky. Well, actually, no, falling into the earth and dying horribly might be the lucky part there.
Over time, those things either get deleted from your perception, which is a problem for you if there's like a 4.5-ton mechanized cyber rhinoceros charging your way that you can't see.
It's still safer than a hippo, so yeah.
Not a great place to be in, usually. Or they become a problem for everyone else when people's spells selectively stop working. Can also be both. You'd think that might be useful.
Also, what he mentioned, spells not working, with how things work in Mage, everything is magic. For example, Okay. This, a phone. It's magic. How does technology work? It's actually magic. Well, you want to say it's the electrons. No, that's not actually it. It's magic. All of that is just magic all the way down. Because what you believe is your understanding is not actually the way it works. It's how you're telling yourself it works as a rote way to understand and make yourself believe it works so that the magic is happening. You're just doing magic. Gunpowder. It could be empty, but you think it works, so it does. And sometimes it doesn't because the magic failed, but you think it's because there's a defect. That's what Mage is. It's all just the way to build it yourself on how you believe something works. And everything is magic all the way down. So a denial would be, okay, heat transference doesn't work. So suddenly AC stops working in the middle of summer and it's like 100 degrees outside and everything else is an oven. But AC doesn't work because this person doesn't, who's mad in denial, denied heat transference is a way AC works. So that component stops working. Do you see where I'm going with this? It's like absolutely absurd because it doesn't just affect mages because it would affect sleepers because that would still be magic who are doing spells. But there's a sorcery because it's magic.
Useful in suppressing deviant magic, but not even the technocracy uses this kind of quiet in their operations because it is completely unpredictable and as liable to mess up your allies as it is your enemies. Yeah. Finally, entropy is represented by the rarest of them all, thankfully, morbidity. Despite its rarity, it's perhaps the most feared and cautioned against among entropists specifically, but it can really happen to anyone. Where madness affirms and denial, well, denies, morbidity disintegrates, rejects, decays belief in reality and its paradigms. It brings destructive forces like violence and death to the fore, as qualms and rules evaporate, and things that were once meaningful are now just emotional vestiges to a newborn nihilist. Being beings of belief in their own reality, the rejection thereof creates a huge amount of terror in mages, which they may not entirely be aware of, but which they have to alleviate somehow. Early stages are often characterized by distrust and paranoia, perhaps even doubling down on the legitimacy and sole legitimacy of one's own belief, to the exclusion of everyone else's. Then the destruction begins, driving the mage further and further into extreme acts of depravity, until they eventually abandon all their principles and exist only to harm in the most vile ways imaginable. This is a fast track to becoming an Nephandi, by the way, which we will talk about later, but
I know enough about Nephandi to realize that might be functionally the same here, but also I would have to hear more about this because maybe I'm just missing information about how maybe it's one of those crossover elements.
most Nephandi are not actually crazy. Now, if everyone around you is lucky, all of this is just in your head. I mean, literally, you might be trapped in a
mindscape, a type of quiet experience entirely within a mage's mind during which they are unconscious. Oh, well, that's actually kind of fascinating.
Mindscape inside your head, essentially in a sort of coma, trying to reconcile your inner madness. But a lot of the time, you're wide awake and making it everyone else's problem. Which is kind of good because everyone knows to look out for your descent into madness. Because the thing is, when someone wakes up from a quiet in like a Mindscape type scenario, you don't know if they came out a Marauder, and that's like not a problem that presents itself here, but you're still a walking reality hazard.
Also, Bill, you mentioned you thought consensus was a global thing. The way consensus works in Mage is, yes, worldwide, but it's only worldwide now because the technocracy standardized the world. For example, every single world who had different beliefs, and they were all worlds unto themselves, were all part of Earth, except they weren't because they were all their own thing. And in fact, calling them worlds might actually be the best way to put it. Because, for example, if you believed the sun god created the world and Ra was the emperor and the pharaoh, because the Greeks did say Ra was the emperor a few times. I'm getting syncretized in the wrong way. But essentially, they said that the Greek gods, the king of the god Zeus would be Ra, or other aspects of that, or Iris or Osiris, and they were moving them back and forth because there was an entire shtick about that. So there'd be people who believe that's real, and that the Greek gods also hid in Egypt from a massive monster titan that killed them all, except it didn't, but then they hid there. But then they also came back, and they were back to being the Greek and Egyptian gods, but they are also still just the Greek ones. And then there was like, they're never actually there, so it's completely separate. So you have three different belief systems, the Greek, the Egyptian, and the people who believe they were actually the same thing. Each one of those would be real. And the laws between them would be different, separate, and change based on where you're at. So if you go to a place where the god created this here, and because you believe it's real, it might be different somewhere else. And that's not even getting into account of the gods that were basically just vampires. Or to quote Cosmic, the Aztec blood sacrifices objectively worked, because if they ever stopped, they would have all died. The world would have ended. But it would have been their part of the world based on their belief, not the entire world, because the entire world didn't have the same belief. That's why honestly, as horrible as a lot of what the technocracy does, they did make it a lot safer for a lot of people, because there were a lot of beliefs that were honestly very self-destructive, but done for the reason that if they stopped, their own belief would kill them. They just changed it. They also then had their own issues, and some of their endgame is absolutely terrifyingly horrific. But they did a lot of good. They just also did a lot of bad, which is, again, one of the things that is a common thing in White Wolf, there's the word, White Wolf writing. There is good and bad in almost everything. You just do your best. Oh, and I'm just going to pull up your comment. Doing videos before the year's end. Sad I missed most of it, as I had to drive home from Kentucky to Georgia. Depending on what parts of the state you're going for, that's one hell of a drive, because I'm pretty sure that goes over the Appalachian Mountains. I think it's the Blue Ridge down in that area. Happy New Year. Hope the next year is a bit better next year. I mean, always, every year. But thank you, though, very much, man. Hope the drive is safe, too, though. Or if you're already home to reply, hopefully that's good. And Cosmic, you mentioned the technocrat goals will always fail. Technically, yes, but that's also not just a unique trait to them. It's actually very much a thing for every faction. And if any of them ever actually fully won, undeniably, it might be horrible.
If you and or others don't manage to stop your descent into madness, eventually it will reach a point of no return. In Mage 20, this point is when the madness meter exceeds the number 6. At this point, your mind just breaks. The immensity of willpower mages possess becomes irrelevant. You are irrevocably shattered. You are a marauder. Even if the strength of your quiet diminishes and you become more in touch with baseline reality, your mind is broken and fundamentally delusional. You will never be normal again. Many marauders are actually quite lucid, even clever with the nature of their delusion, able to pretend that they are perfectly fine. It's not at all uncommon for marauders to be aware of the fact that others think they're crazy. And it can be very frustrating to know that everyone else is just incapable of seeing the truth. But you still have...
That actually is news to me, because I didn't realize marauders could regain the awareness of other people. That actually is not something I was aware of, because it means that there's a lot of interesting aspects there, because the truth of mages, again, I've said this many times, I'm going to say it many times in the future, that they are absolutely correct. Reality is whatever you think it is, but also everyone else. If there is a sane marauder, that gives a lot of power to them, because I don't know how that would be balanceable. It's probably why you can never actually play a sane marauder. It would make it nearly unbeatable, because Gator Arms, yeah, I've watched a lot of American Wizard, is a very valid aspect that they would have no downside to. And they just have to remind themselves, oh yeah, that's not normal for everyone else, if they care to remember. But they could, and that gives them so much more leeway and power.
Have your agenda, so you'll have to be smart and keep quiet about it. Since mages tend to be highly eccentric, even some of the marginally louder marauders can sometimes fly under the radar. Usually what happens is that these broken mages begin practicing a wackier, alternate form of their original paradigm that often includes elements which are illogical in that paradigm. An enlightened medical doctor might take to using dead body parts as a new focus because the dead cannot be harmed by injury or disease. A Shaolin ascetic might begin heavily indulging in drugs as a means to sharpen their focus. A forest druid might begin polluting the land in order to make the pollution into something natural. Some of these things are things,
and yet you could expect that anything he just said, even though they're examples of insanity that would never actually work, is not the craziest thing you've ever heard from a mage. So yeah, I can see why a lot of it would fly under the radar. For example, an aesthetic using drugs. It's like, yeah, that's like most of them. It's not the only way you could play them, but it's the only one that really most people who get into the aesthetics could do, unless they go full on, yeah, power of rock, yeah! That was me trying to air guitar. As you can tell, I have no idea how to air guitar.
Any mage might just try. You'd need to know these people well to see how that is completely contrary to their nature. Another thing that might clue you in is that marauders are often able to create certain effects that they should not be capable of. The according mage simply does not know enough about the spheres needed to manifest a certain effect, but they manifest the effect anyway. They just do it. There's not necessarily any logic to this. It's not like they can sometimes ignore a minor sphere they would need to cast a certain spell, or that it's like rarer with spells that are completely outside of their enlightenment bailiwick.
It's almost like they've taken the next step into actually understanding the truth is what it sounds like. Unless they're insane and more, no. My initial concept was they're too sane because they realize it doesn't matter. It is what I say it is, and what I say it is whatever I believe, and I believe this fully because I am incapable of not believing it. I can realize other people don't, but it's still right, and it works, so I'm right. Fuck all y'all. Yeah.
Sometimes just do things that are in line with their paradigm. It's
also, someone gave an example. Actually, Crane, I'll pull yours up right now. PETA is full of marauders. Actually, no, that would be an exact opposite of that. Because everyone knows PETA is basically self-destructive. And they are, personal belief is funded by people who actually benefit from animal experimentation because they are the greatest ad against looking into what the hell kind of things they've done and are more detrimental to their own cause than anything. But that wouldn't be the case because for a PETA marauder, it would be that as soon as they're there, they actually do change the world so that they're right. And it might go back afterwards, but it would be them actually being right. Having a consistent change, oh, that's kind of odd, would not really be a thing that a marauder could do. They could do a consistent change in their area, but only in their area, unless it's in their head, which being stuck in your head permanently would kind of suck. But I'm not sure if that would be the case.
Entirely unreliable, but it happens. On the flip side, marauders are limited in the level of power that they can achieve. They do, of course, still grow and learn, but the most powerful mages need to reconcile concepts entirely paradoxical to how they and everyone view the world. And a marauder's twisted perception of reality simply isn't capable of doing that. Not that it's really a concern for them. Most marauders are either hunted or evicted from reality into deep umbral realms and sort of...
Oh, so they are actually pushed out of reality itself. Okay, and that's where Horizon Realm comes in. It may or may not be where the leaders of both the traditions and the technocracy add, which could be the game system actually indicating that the higher-ups of the technocracy and the higher-ups of the traditions are essentially all marauders at this point because they can't exist within reality. Oh... that would explain a lot. Ah.
Disappear into strange worlds where even daring mages fear to tread. Well, perhaps that is the best place for them to be. Perhaps that is where they can find true enlightenment. Because their power to change reality doesn't diminish out there. They are just completely shielded from all paradox now.
Also, Marty mentioned Horizon realms are constructed, Marauders get pushed way further out. Yeah, but if they're also doing it consistently enough, at what point do they make of themselves Marauders? And that's actually a dividing line that might be very interesting because, how to put it? Is there a dividing line between being insane enough to be a Marauder and becoming indistinguishable from Run? No, I don't know. I actually don't know.
And all they encounter submits to their localized reality. They may not even be aware that they have left the real world behind centuries ago. Aside from being strongly flavored by the type of quiet that turned them into a Marauder, there are two additional categories they fall into. As is often the case with mental health issues, you have to come up with broad categories because what you're trying to taxonomize is too diverse and idiosyncratic. However, with some notable exceptions, these two map pretty neatly onto whether a quiet was loud or, quiet. Internal Marauders, also known as perceptual Marauders, are those quiet ones. They don't do a lot of reality warping, it's only their private perception that is warped, and they tend to be the most keenly aware that others don't see things this way. So while there is little danger of them bending everything to their localized consensus, though the danger is never zero, they are quite good at fitting in.
Although, to be fair, the danger never being zero applies to every mage if they decide, fuck Paradox, and do it anyways. Oh, I was going to pull this up. And Raw, you mentioned, its worst PETA and Best Friends Animal Society was founded by a cult kicked out of Scientology. One dropped the cult, the other made a different one. Yeah, that sounds perfectly up there. Although it's not the only cult I've heard on doing other things. For example, you might have heard of Cornflakes. Yeah. Designed by a cult and then bought by General Mills. Yeah. I knew about that one before the Youth Pastor Ryan videos about tea and all of the cults involved in that. Yeah, there's a lot of things that cults did that are just now normal and you just don't question because it's terrifying.
And slowly shaping the people around them to their personal ideas, which are, of course, utter madness. But they're infectious. Mages are susceptible to this, but sleepers are even more so. And consider that all the organizations do include
so an internal Marauder is the one who can hide it the best. So they're probably the more nefarious ones without intending, because they could unintentionally just warp people into ways that do not work outside of their presence, like believing in a flat earth, and then everyone being absolutely dedicated to it, even though outside of that Marauder, it doesn't work that way. Oh.
Sleepers, often sorcerers or extraordinary citizens who know some basic procedural magic. And forget about organizations that were in a Marauder's control in the first place. They will change how those sleepers see the world, often intentionally, as Marauders will sometimes stop at nothing to bring people around to their view of things.
Oddly enough, though, if they got enough people to agree with it, it would become consensus, and if a Marauder got enough sleepers to agree, at what point do they achieve what the technocracy did and make a new consensus? And does that still apply to them as a Marauder at that point if everyone is agreeing with them? Like, they're so crazy they become sane. That actually would be a fascinating plot hook itself. How do you deal with a world that has become insane to you, where you are by default the Marauder because the Marauder won? Huh. Or for example, there's a lot of fantasy out there where it's like a sudden flash and then the world is different and all of the what you know has been changed. The people you know are different and the rules do not work as you expect. You could say that a Marauder convinced everyone to believe differently so that there is a new consensus that you're not a part of. But even if the Marauder's gone at that point, it's still the new consensus, so it wouldn't matter. Is that a thing? I don't know. Hell, it might even be a good example of, does this religion work here? I don't know. I really don't know. But it would be a very fascinating way to play it off. You know, considering my DM is here, I probably shouldn't say these things out loud because they might get ideas. And I don't think getting the ideas as a DM is ever a safe thing for anyone playing under them. Huh. Martin, you mentioned most sleepers don't last long enough for what happens in a Marauder world. Probably. But on the other hand, maybe they do. Maybe magic is just normal. There's dragons and fantasy everywhere. And it just happens to believe Tolkien is real, is the Marauders aesthetic. That would be kind of fascinating as a way just to do a crossover game.
If left undetected over time, they can change the whole way major organizations work. The other type of Marauder is the external Marauder, also known as an actualized Marauder. They will change the world around themselves wherever they go and follow agendas beyond anyone's understanding. As a threat, they're much more overt, because though the changes their presence creates do revert to their original state, effects they manifest obviously do not, and they are utterly unconcerned with paradox. So not only can they do as they please, the paradox backlash does double damage to the world around them as well.
Oh.
They're not all cataclysmic wrecking balls, right? Some exist in a consensus not unlike everyone else's, a world pretty similar to our own, where perhaps humans are ultimately just animals with no impulse control. So when they sit in a...
Are we sure that's actually... Oh, it's based... He's describing Florida Man. Like, he's describing a Marauder who makes everyone Florida Man. Martin, I know you're watching. Please don't. Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, no.
McDonald's late at night, enjoying some soggy fries. Those two complete strangers next to them will just start fucking on the table. Those
like I said, Florida Man.
Fan groups will beat the shit out of each other.
Florida.
And the employee back there who hates himself because he works at Mac's will dip his face in hot oil as punishment. More like Mad Donald's. Am I right? To them, of course, this is entirely normal. The whole world is like this. When they leave, those behavioral tendencies will no longer be there. But all the things that happened because of them will still have happened.
See, that's actually something I've heard multiple different takes on. The "it still happened" part. I've heard it two different ways. One is how he said it. It happened and suddenly the reason it happened is gone. The other is it never actually happened. Something did, and now reality has to explain it. That is how you play it, and that would be very unique because it could be the guy stuck his face in there. That's horrific, and under a normal reality with normal consensus, he never would do that. Maybe he just ended up doing something else horrible to himself that would lead to the same outcome. Maybe not a friar, but maybe he slipped and fell, and it's this horrible, unfortunate accident that's insane, but happened in a way that would coincide with reality. Or those people on the table, they were doing drugs. Or those people fighting, okay, that's actually probably pretty normal enough, so it probably wouldn't matter. But that's the kind of way I've heard it played off. The other would be suddenly snap back to reality, but it just happened. You have to deal with the what is going on. That's a different way to play it. Both can be fascinating in equal ways, and I guess it's left open for how the DM wants to play. Because again, everything does come down to the DM. His way is probably the more terrifying because it's, we're doing this. This is not right. Why is it happening? I don't know.
At that point, it might have been better if they had just believed everything in the universe is made of cheese. Because at least then everybody would have left the McDonald's pretty much unharmed. Maybe the people in the kitchen would have melted a little bit. That would have been unfortunate. Though consensus knits itself back together pretty diligently, often erasing all evidence of what has happened, which is why you don't see many photographs of Santa's sleigh, even though the milk and cookies are gone, it can still be deeply traumatic for the people who experience them. Especially if those people are mages and can actually remember the experience with great clarity, as opposed to just like blurred and bizarre memories easily attributed to some other state of intoxication. That can bring those mages into their own quiet, or perhaps worse, awaken potential sleepers straight into Crazy Town with little to no guidance.
Oh, they can just awaken people as mages. Oh, that sounds absolutely horrific, and probably something in the book. And also, according to Martin, Berger's way is the closest to canon. Huh. Okay.
This is one of the ways that, like, unions of Marauders form. Not to fight capital, but to, like, you know, social units. They obviously
because they're
have no
agreeing with the
organized society.
insanity.
Their categorization is entirely an external thing. There's no...
Because they have the same type of a delusion, because they were waking up to a delusion. And Martin, remember, World of Darkness is a horror setting? Yes, but also everything seems to have an option of a good outcome if you really want to work towards it. Yeah.
Like, shared Marauder identity. Most Marauders would reject that label and exist entirely within their own reality anyway. But they do sometimes work together and amass cults and followings, often because they confront people with this alternate reality and it just snaps them straight out of consensus. Sometimes they can work together because the nature of their delusion is similar enough. They agree on enough things for them to recognize that though the others are wrong about some of the stuff, they are, by and large, more understanding of the truth than most. It's like how conspiracy theorists who, like, don't believe all the conspiracies, but respect and work with others who believe in some level of conspiracy. When that happens, we call it a cabal. Some Marauders are part of the same delusion, often created by the same experience, though not always.
So it'd be the people who are snapped together by the crazy McDonald's experience, but then also the guy who randomly was at a Wendy's where something similar happened, but it's just different enough that they don't actually respect the McDonald's people. But it's like, we can work to you because the Taco Bell guy's completely out of there. We didn't deal with that. Actually, oh God, can you imagine a Taco Bell Marauder? No, I can't. I'm not going to ever do it. I will refuse to ever acknowledge that. It's not a thing that will ever happen.
It can also happen as, like, the beliefs of various Marauders, especially those in a cabal, are, like, influenced by one another and eventually sort of they line up. They don't agree among each other at all anymore. They're just the only ones who understand. In which case, we call this a fusion. And it can be quite dangerous because these Marauders sometimes share an almost telepathic link with one another. They may even be actually trying to induct new people into...
So if it's actually a telepathic link and everyone's going into the same... So it literally could be a fusion. So on a non-mage basis to understand this, this could be a way to explain if you ever wanted to write a mage setting set in Isaac Asimov's childhood's end. Not the conclusion I was expecting to draw today. For anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Isaac Asimov's work prior to I think it was prior to Foundation, but I could be wrong, involved Childhood's End, which was demons come to Earth, they're helping humanity ascend. But it's only going to be the children 50 years in the future who all lose all individuality and become a hive mind that could reshape reality at a fundamental level to merge with the giant overmind of the entire everything. And demons are jealous, but they want to help out because they can never do it themselves. That's like the least they could do. And they fucked up before, which is why humanity hates them. Yeah. Also, it ended with humanity that wasn't merging into one being of consciousness, dying horribly usually, but usually very peaceful up until that point. But then also, literally, the world is eaten in the conflagration of the creation of the human overmind that merges with it, which is just a bunch of children, except it's just one child who uses all the bodies at once until they don't need the bodies anymore. I'll be honest, Childhood's End is not a horror novel. It's meant by Isaac Asimov as almost hopeful. I can't look at it as anything other than horror, though. That's just my take.
Their fusion. On especially rare occasions, something even crazier happens. Marauders work together while being completely unaware of each other, perhaps even diametrically opposed in their goals and worldview. They each follow their own crazy plan, and somehow, through the force of mad synchronicity, they can achieve some particular goal they are often unaware of themselves, something greater than the sum of its parts. Usually when that happens, there is some other deeper Marauder involved, one who has learned to comprehend the strings of madness and to direct others of their kind.
Which in its own right is terrifying, because that leaves almost completely untraceable monkey paws who are in their own right completely terrifying.
These are excessively rare, luckily, but the technocracy and traditions are always on the lookout for them. Unfortunately, they completely defy rational understanding, both in the way they think and in the way they do actually manipulate those other marauders. It's something you need to be crazy to understand, and apparently among the crazy, there are just some wise enough to know what makes the others tick. There's a surprisingly great number of marauders that you can find in media if you, interpret everything through a wad lens. Patrick Bateman, for instance.
Oh yeah, because just randomly doing this would make sense to him. And it would be normal to just be that kind of corporate scumbag who would just randomly kill people. Yeah.
Is clearly an
Also, I don't know why this never occurred to me, but same actor who did The Dark Knight. Yeah, I don't know why I never connected those before for years.
Marauder, the Pyro from Team Fortress 2, right? Tim, aka Jimmy Sisko from Misfits, the video game guy, him as well. As for externals, you might say Jobu Tupaki from Everything Everywhere All at Once is a powerful example. Freddy Krueger, but he does live in the dreaming. And also Project Moloch from Dirk Gently, who luckily focuses on the creation of umbral planes on account of being heavily sedated. Also,
I don't know almost any of those references, and I'm completely pulling a blank on a few of them. Okay. Sure.
I have some in-universe WOT examples, and because various books on Mage and Marauders already have a few of these characters for you, I'm going to give you a few more entirely of my own creation to give you an idea as to what a Marauder can be. This is actually
fascinating to see what he would create.
I'm not officially affiliated with World of Darkness in any capacity, so...
This came out 7 months ago, I think? Yeah, 7 months ago. I'm actually a little surprised World of Darkness haven't contacted him, just because he's a great gateway drug to their entire system, man. In the same way Hunter the Parenting is. Wouldn't be surprised if there is someone at least aware of it there. Although actually it'd be even more funny if in a later edition, they decide to align better with what he's explaining it as, or reference him as one of the just random pop culture memes they drop in. Because they do that.
None of this is remotely canon, it's just my World of Darkness. First, we will talk about madness-type marauders, where an example for an internal one could be Weibsviech.
Oh,
a
German.
Genuine creature by her own definition who stalks the forests of East Germany. An old coven of Verbanists in Western Poland will tell you of a young witch named Annegret, who decades ago was concerned with the encroachment of more and more construction on the wilderness. She was a recluse, so nobody knows exactly when she went mad, but she most certainly did. In her belief system, humans and the products of human civilization have no soul. They are empty vessels attempting to colonize the natural world and...
Oh, that is a very terrifying belief in the World of Darkness, considering soul is a very real thing. Oh...
eliminate its spirits. But Weibsviech herself isn't actually human. She has the soul of an animal, and she must fortify the wilderness against the invasion and repel those who would exploit it.
The funniest thing ever for this character would be to encounter the wares, like any of the Garu. Because if they're in a monstrous, a full-on wolf form for the werewolves, specifically the wolves, yeah, they're probably fine. But if they're in a human enough form, suddenly soulless sounds like the absolute worst possible outcome, especially depending on how they tear it apart.
In my mind, there is no meaningful distinction between humans, cars, and houses, just as there is no distinction between rabbits, trees, and lakes.
Which is actually weird for the World of Darkness, because everything has a spirit in World of Darkness. Being empty and soulless fundamentally breaks the reality of how the setting works. So it's actually very destructive.
Forces, life and empty. One of the good things about this is that a lot of the time, the mayhem she causes is property damage, because that's as good as killing people. One of the bad things is that she's also very good at killing people. Being highly proficient with the life sphere, she is a cunning shapeshifter who constantly alters her appearance, readily switching between looking like an innocuous house cat to a giant bison bear with porcupine spikes. She may even appear human for a while, always as part of some ruse. She never speaks though, because as an animal she doesn't understand speech. She perceives it as a sort of alien telepathy. She also riles up and empowers nature spirits, leading to very localized but nonetheless devastating natural catastrophes. Her madness has been bleeding into these spirits and all the life in the forest. For years now, from the wind to the wolves to the fish, the forests of East Germany are often suicidally hostile toward the forces of humanity.
Anyone else just suddenly thought sounds like Australia, then realized, oh no, it actually does sound like Australia? Like, is there just a super old, super powerful internal marauder who has fundamentally altered that entire continent? Because I can see that happening in lore. Like, unironically, I just, that makes sense. I don't like it making sense. Make it stop making sense.
It's no accident that the Red Talons have become so empowered in the heart of Europe over the last few years.
Oh.
Many of the more nature-oriented Garou consider her a powerful ally, though they can only guess as to what she is. Other tribes, like the Glasswalkers, see her as an absolute fucking menace.
Yeah,
perhaps
probably accurate.
The most frustrating things to those who have attempted to hunt her down, those who survived the attempt at least, is that she seems to have excessively easy access to disappear into the Umbra, specifically the umbral dimension of the infinite primordial forest, which always stirs itself up in her defense. This problem also explains why she's been sighted all over the world. She does seem to be circling Berlin though, as she always has, and recently those circles have been getting tighter and tighter. A more external matter.
I'm going to cut this one here because of the time, but oh dear God, man. I love this. This is so cool. Because like that is someone who's all internal, but they're spreading the madness and infecting the world around them, being a horrible killer themselves, but making it more and more broken and more dangerous because their reality is infecting other things around them, make disaster more terrible. It honestly seems like even though an internal marauder might be the easier or the harder to detect one, they have the more long-lasting effects because they spread to others who then embrace it. And then not just humans, but spirits and things of almost magical nature in its own right. Oh, I love this. I absolutely love this. And the best part is you wouldn't even be able to tell if it's insane or not because everyone else just kind of rolls with it. But it's almost impossible to tell until it's biting you in the face because that is the most insidious. Where someone external is going to be blatantly horrible, but it's blatant. So it's much easier to tell after the fact. Where if it's the internal one, it could also just be some asshole who is a mage who believes this because a mage could easily do everything she just did. It's just the infection of other people with her belief that is the more insidious part. Oh. Yeah. Either way, you guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. And I need to check this out more later all the time. If it's not next week, it'll... Oh, actually, it won't be next week. Shit. It'll probably be next Sunday as well. But just... This is awesome. You guys need to check out the video if you haven't already. Do that. I'll see you in the next one. Adios.